We're talking about preparing the menachos, and now we have the Gemara Menachos quoting Rabbi Yirmiyah. And Rabbi Yirmiyah vacillates about holacha vehava, and he wants to know whether that could be considered shifa achas or shtei shifas, right? We spoke about, banging the kernels and removing their klipos in different sorts of ways and different methods. How many times you have to do it? You use this method 300 times and this method 500 times. Now, basically, when we talk about l'shafshafon, and that was the category that required 300 times, that's called holacha vova shel kaf hayad aleh. Right? He takes the palm of his hand and he sort of rolls it back and forth over the surface of these kernels. And then there's what's called 500 be'itos, where he takes his closed fist and he bangs down with his fingers, with his knuckles. So Rabbi Yirmiyah vacillates. He says, what about holacha and avah? There's one direction and the other direction. So let's say he puts the palm of his hand and he moves it forward, and then he moves it backwards. Can we count that as two, or it's counted as one? So when we say we need 300 shifos, does it mean holacha and avah times 300, or holacha could be, let's say, 150 halachos, and avah would be 150 havos? So when he moves his hand back, that's considered a shifa. Okay, that really belongs to our discussion of yesterday. And then finally, just to finish our discussion of yesterday, we have something called l'sisa. L'sisa means that we take kernels of wheat and we soak them in water. And in the Gemara Psachim, there's a whole discussion about whether or not l'sisa is allowed, is permitted, if I'm going to take these kernels of wheat and afterwards I'm going to dry them and crush them, grind them, and make a flour, and then a flour, I'm going to add water and bake them. And are they matzah or are they chametz? Because in the process of what's called shriya b'mayim, in soaking grains in water, it speeds up the process of leavening, of fermentation. And now we have a brisa that says, "Ein losasin eschite amenochos." In other words, just like in chimutz, with regard to the lav of chametz on Pesach, we do not allow you to do l'sisa and to soak the kernels in water because it speeds up the process of fermentation. The same halacha, the parallel halacha, applies to chite menachos. Right, there are pieces of the menachos that we're trying to get rid of, the bran, let's say, or the klipos, and we gave different methodologies of how you have to do this, but can I just soak them in water? And the answer is no, I'm not allowed to soak them in water. Why? Because Shema Yavo Lidei Chimus. A mincha cannot be chametz. I mean, obviously that's not going to apply to shtei alechem, which is chametz. Milvad minchas ha'omer she'losin osa kodem pchinasa shekein hayu kol maseh nasa b'tzibur v'tzibur osa v'smasem b'zrizus v'nizharim b'chimus. So the halacha is the following, that when you operate as an individual and you have to avoid chimutz, if you place and soak grains, let's say wheat grains, whatever grains, in water, we're always afraid that inadvertently or unintentionally it might come lidei chibutz and you didn't even pay any attention to it. But if you operate together with a tzibur, an entire group, then one person will warn another person and say, wait a minute, we have to do something fast because unless we stop and arrest the process, we leave it as is, it's going to come lidei chibutz. And now in the process of menachos, we're going to assume that menachos belong to a yachid, an individual. Let's say Reuven is bringing a mincha, Shimon is bringing a mincha. But the exception is minchas ha'omer. The minchas ha'omer on the 16th of Nisan is not brought by Reuven or Shimon, it's brought by the entire tzibur. And any action of the tzibur always has built-in zehirus, extra care and meticulous care. And therefore, in the case of minchas ha'omer, as opposed to all the other menachos, you can actually allow the sisa before you grind down the grains. You can soak them in order to get rid of the mursan, these chaffs and so forth, because any action that's implemented by the tzibur for the tzibur is done with zrizus, with care, with extra care, and we're going to certainly make sure that it doesn't come with a chibutz. The assumption of this Gemara and this Brisa seems to be that you can immediately recognize chibutz. There's no such thing as concealed chibutz. If it became chametz, you'll notice, you'll see it. My impression always was just the opposite, that you cannot always be sure that there's no chibutz. The chibutz as a halachic concept is very subtle. It's not so obvious. And that could work in two ways. You could have something that looks like it's chibutz and it's not chametz. You could have something that doesn't look like chametz, but it already is chametz. I don't know if you've ever seen on Pesach Jews eating pitot. Have you ever seen it? I've seen it. Like, for example, I remember a few years ago, the botanical gardens, it's not that far from here. So they had a free day, it was sponsored by one of the banks, I don't remember which bank, on Chol Hamoed Pesach. And I was absolutely shocked. It was the first time in my life I encountered religious Jews eating pitot. I said, what's going on over here? This is a chiv karetz. But the definition of chibutz is a very subtle halachic legal definition, and something which you and I would have said is certainly chametz is not necessarily chametz. You can have very thick matzahs that look exactly like chametz, but they're not chametz. But this brisa that we're studying now seems to assume that it's inherently obvious and recognizable if it came to lidei chibutz. And therefore the tzibur, when they're working together as a community to bring the minchas ha'omer on the 16th of Nisan, they will be very careful and they'll say, wait a minute, it's coming lidei chibutz. We got to do something. We have to arrest the process. Take it immediately out of water and freeze it. I don't know, whatever you have to do. Okay, so this is all the introduction to what we're going to study now. And that is, let's say I have my kernels. I did whatever I have to do. I did the 300 shifos. I did the 500 be'itos. I avoided any sort of soaking in water. And then I take my grains, and after they're dry, I'm ready for crushing, for grinding, which is called tchina. But I need nipui. You remember that we've discussed in the past that nipui is a process by which we use a sieve and we sift out those parts of the flour that have to be sifted out. Therefore, Es achitin berechaim shel grusos, klomar tchina gasa lepirurim ovim. So we're now up to the first stage of tchina, and the purpose and the goal of this first stage of tchina is to remove the klipos from the pits themselves. And that's called tchina gasa, which means we use some sort of a mill. And the mill will remove what we call klipos. So that's stage number one of tchina, just to remove the thick coverings over the kernels of grain. The gamma garinim atzman are mischalkim lekemach dak ulekarti, which is gushe solis. So what else does he accomplish by this first level of tchina, what we call tchina gasa? In addition to removing these very thick kernels, he also accomplishes a different goal, and he's able to divide up the flour, which is a result of the tchina, into two categories. One is what he calls karti, and the other he calls dak. Dak means that it's very fine, refined flour. And karti he calls gushe solis, which means that sometimes the flour sort of, if I can use the word coagulates, in other words, it forms different clumps. Right, we've only removed at first stage through a tchina gasa some of the larger pieces of kernels and shafts that have to be removed. And we didn't finish the job yet. Achakach, Kodshim umenapen es hasubin v'asoles benapa gasa shahoisa koletes es hasubin umotziin es karte asoles. Right, we said that there were clumps of flour that sort of gathered together. We got to make sure to get rid of those. The achakach hayu chozrim b'tochnin es karte asoles b'rechaim dakos b'solet zu hi hara'uya lemincha. Now we get to the last and final stage, the final stage of tchina, where we take these clumps of soles and we use now a mill, but not rechaim gasos, but rather rechaim dakos, that will absolutely purify the soles of any leftover clumps or pieces of klipa. And now we're ready for the next stage, which is called medida, to measure the soles and to measure the shemen. So we have a utensil, a kli shares, that holds a volume of an isaron, and we're going to measure out the refined flour by pouring it into this kli. And since the kli has a maximum capacity of an isaron, we'll be able to determine whether or not this solas has an isaron. Now he has to measure out the shemen for the mincha. He pours the shemen into utensil that has a capacity of a lug, of a liquid substance that has a lug. So now we know we have an isaron of soles and a lug of shemen. Kalim elu kedosha b'kedushas pleishares. The af mincha shahoisa mikama esronim the kama lugim. Says the following. What happens in the case of a mincha that requires multiple isronim? What was that case? That was the par? Right. I think it was the par. I don't have it with me. 3 isronim. Okay. And what the ayal was 2 isronim? So if, let's say, in the case of par, you need 3 esronim. One second. And how many lugim did we require in the case of a par? Chatzi lug. It's a double hin, right? So chatzi lug. He's got 3 esronim and a chatzi lug. Wait a minute. So what was shlosha lugim? We had something that was shlosha lugim. And 3 lugim of shemen? And so where was the 3 lugim of shemen? That's what I don't remember. Maybe we didn't get to this. But anyway, he's assuming here, in the name of the Chazon Ish, that you can have a kli, or this is even before the Chazon Ish, you could have a kli that retains 3 lugim of shemen. He doesn't tell you exactly why. But in any event, so now he has a mincha that's made of kama esronim with kama lugim. Vayashem nimdat kama pam binas lug bi'amida nitzreches. So the medida, the measuring out of these materials, whether it's soles or shemen, should be appropriate for that which he needs for the mincha. So if he needs for the mincha kam esronim, he should be measuring kam esronim. If he needs for the mincha kamal lugim, he'll be measuring it out with a kli of kamal lugim. So Yashem and Nibdad kama pa'omin b'midas lug kefi hamida nitzrechas v'lo b'midot shel shlosha lugim shay b'migdash. This is a pella. I apologize. I didn't see this Mishnah inside. You have to see this inside. Can we get a Would you mind, Steve, behind this wall, they have Mishnayis Kahati. I would need a Gemara Menachos as well. I'm just trying to figure out. He has here Nido Shel Shlosha Lugim. Maybe he explains it in the next paragraph. It says, Mibidida Bisaran Shel Kodesh. No, that's something else. Thank you. Let me just open up Peches. Let's see. Maybe he means no Chais Kahan.
Down low, and I can't see it. Oh, I'm just.
Okay. So let's see. See if we can find this. Well, this, I think he divides it up in a different. Yeah, he has a different order of the Mishnayos. Yeah. In our Gemara Bavli, this is called the 10th parak, but in the Mishnayos, it's called the 9th parak. So he says here, unfortunately, I don't have that page in front of me right now. You have that page. We're on page what now? Tess? So if you look, I think it would be on page. Again, I can't communicate with the other fellows because of the Zoom business. But I think it's on maybe on page Zion or Ches. You see where he goes through the different. Again, I have to go outside. It's on my stender. I mean, I probably have it here somewhere, but I put it away yesterday. I was trying to clear up my page. If you can find page Zion. What does that say? That's I'm sure it's here somewhere. All right, just my luck here. Anyway, so he writes here, Shlosha Lugim Lekebes. Okay. Yeah, what we probably really need is we have to know the size of a hin. How many lugim are in a hin? We have Shlosha Lepar. If you don't find it, again, it's a chutz on my part, Steve, but on my shtend, you'll see a Gemara Menachos, so you'll find Zayin. He says here, Loya Moded Lo B'Shel Shlosha Lepar. You don't mind opening it? See if you can open it. Shlosha Lepar. The Sofim Shal Par. Ha'te'una Shlosha Esronim Solis. Okay. Lo hayu modedin es hasolis b'mida achas hamachzeke shlosha esronim. V'lo b'shal ayil shnayim li ayil v'chein minchas nesofim shal ayil ha'te'una shnei esronim solis. Lo hayu modedin b'mida achas hamachzeke shnei esronim el modedin esronos. If I understand correctly, the only way we do this medida is with a utensil that holds an isara. We'll have to do, in the case of a par, which requires 3 esronim of solas, we're going to have to do three midos or 3 medidos in the case of a par, and shtei medidos in the case of the ayil. So I'm not sure. The impression I get here is that there was no receptacle that held more than an isara. Therefore, you had to do a medida one after the other. Now let's see how that applies in the case of a liquid, which is called lach. So we have here revius lug, which is a receptacle that holds a revius of lug, and that's revius mayim lemitzora, and then revius shemen lenazir, we have a chatzi lug mayim lesota, chatzi lug shemen letoda, the lug ha'yimodin l'chol ha'menachos. So all the menachos were measured in a receptacle that held a lug. And why is that? Because in the case of a mincha, the standard mincha that requires isar and soles, you bring with that isar and soles a lug of shemen. Va'afilu mincha shel shishim isar and soles nosim al shishim lug shemen. And Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer afilu mincha shel shisha misaron ein lo elo luga. It's the lug shemen. Then he says shisha lepar. You need 6 lugim of shemen. Oh, so now we figure out where the hin is. A hin, if you could, somebody has to write this down for me, or maybe we'll put it on the whiteboard. A hin is equal to 12 lugim. So a half a hin of shemen, which is necessary for a par, is equal to 6 lugim. Arbola ayil, arbol lugim shemen, that's shlishis ahin. Shlosha lekeves, which is shlosha lugim shemen, that's a revius ahin in the case of a keves, which we're trying to find that paragraph. Found it? Yeah. Put it here for a second. Okay. Where is it? Let's say, let's just get a. Shemen. For what? For a par? Okay. And then, how much shemen do we have for an aisle? It's on page Zion, the only page we couldn't find, right? Shlishis ahin for an aisle, correct? So let's see. So shlishis ahin, let's say for keves we said what? Chatzi ahin? Or is that a par? You get this, a par was chatzi ahin. A keves or an aisle is shlish ahin. So shlish ahin, if let's say a hin is 12 lugim, 4. So which is the case of revius ahin? Here is it. So in the case of a keves ben shnosa, okay, so then we get complicated here. But a keves ben shnosa requires a revius ahin, and a revius ahin would be shlosha lugim. But he says here that what? That thing here. He says, "Belug hayamodek l'chol hamenochos." That's what I understand here. Belug hayamodek b'chol hamenochos. Let's just read this one more time, and then we'll try to wrap this up. He says the following. Asoles lemincha hoisen imdedes b'kli shel midas isaron, v'ashemen hayinimdad b'kli shel midas lug. The af mincha shahoisa mikama esronim v'kama lugim is hoya. Again, I don't know why he emphasizes only shemen. I can't figure that out. Hoya shemen nidad kama pa'amim v'midas lug kifi midah nitzreches. Below the midah shel shlosha lugim. Right, shlosha lugim we said is a revius ahin, correct? And we said that in the case of a keves ben shnoso, he needs a revius ahin, right? Revius ahin shemen, which is the same thing as shlosha lugim. So in that case, you would have to measure it out 3 times, right? You dig it in, 1 lug of shemen, and then another lug of shemen, and then a 3rd lug of shemen. Yesh me'achronim shekosav, shamedida b'isaron shel kodesh eina el mitzvah, v'gam im modad b'kli chol hamincha kshera. So he's saying we don't need, as far as the medida is concerned, a kli sharetz. We can do it in a kli chol. Sharia medida eina me'avodas hamincha el rak ladas kamalite. And then he's going to pour it, I guess, into a klishares to be makadosh. The yesha kosav shamedida eina rak b'chtei ladas eshira sols v'shemen elahudin b'cheftzeh shal mincha shetiskadesh dafka yidei medidasan b'klishares. He's got an opinion of the Brisker Rav that the medida itself is going to be makadesh the solus and the shemen, so you need a kli shares for medida, not like the Chazon Ish says that you can use a kli chol. And that ends page test. Mitzvah tomorrow we'll pick up page Yud. And now we can open up the Gemara in Perek Yom Kippur. Okay, I apologize. It took a little bit longer than I had expected.